My name is Corey, and at 35, I've poured my heart and soul into building my dream lakeside home for 12 years. When my phone rang that Tuesday morning, I never expected to hear that my own parents had sold my property behind my back. "You've always wasted money on meaningless things," my mother declared coldly. "Your sister's 5th wedding needs that money more." What they didn't know was why I couldn't hide my smile as they spoke. Before I tell you why, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button to join my journey of family betrayal and sweet justice. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where financial struggles were a constant backdrop to my childhood. Our split-level home was comfortable enough, but my parents, Harold and Diane Richardson, always seemed to be one emergency away from financial disaster. Despite this, they somehow managed to find money for anything my younger sister Amanda wanted. From the moment Amanda was born when I was 3, it became clear who held the spotlight in our family. While I wore hand-me-downs and worked mowing lawns at 13, Amanda received designer clothes and the latest gadgets. "Your sister is sensitive," my mother would say. "She needs more support." This pattern continued year after year, creating an invisible wall between me and the rest of my family. At 15, I discovered my passion for architecture when my high school offered a special design program. I spent hours sketching buildings, creating floor plans, and reading about famous architects. When I showed my detailed drawing of our dream house renovation to my parents, my father glanced at it and said, "Nice hobby, but don't get your hopes up about college. We need to save for Amanda's future." It was the first time I fully understood I would be on my own. That summer, I landed 2 jobs: mornings at a local construction site carrying supplies for the workers, and evenings bussing tables at a restaurant. The construction foreman, a man named Ray, noticed my interest in the blueprints and began teaching me about structural design. "Kid, you've got an eye for this," he told me one day. "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." Through my junior and senior years, I maintained a perfect GPA while working nearly 30 hours weekly. My parents rarely attended my academic award ceremonies, as they conflicted with Amanda's dance recitals or cheerleading competitions. When I received a partial scholarship to the State University's architecture program, my mother's response was, "That's nice, but you'll still need to pay for most of it. Amanda might want to attend that prestigious arts school in New York." I moved into a tiny campus apartment with 3 roommates and worked at the university library, a cafe, and as a teaching assistant to cover tuition and expenses. While other students partied on weekends, I studied and picked up extra shifts. When Amanda dropped out of her first college after 1 semester, my parents paid for her to attend a different school, which she also quit within months. During my final year, I landed an internship at Westbrook Associates, a respected architectural firm in the city. They offered me a full-time position upon graduation, and for the first time, I felt my hard work was paying off. At my graduation ceremony, my parents arrived late and left early for Amanda's 3rd college orientation. "I'm proud of you, son," my father said briefly before they departed. It was the closest thing to approval I'd received in years. For the next 2 years, I lived frugally in a small studio apartment near the firm. I brought lunch from home, rarely went out, and put nearly 70% of my salary into savings. My colleagues nicknamed me the monk for my disciplined lifestyle, but I had a vision that sustained me through the lonely weekends and long hours. At 23, during a work trip to northern Wisconsin, I stumbled upon a 3-acre lakefront property with pine forests and breathtaking views. The land was reasonably priced due to its remote location, and something inside me knew this was it, the place where I would build my own masterpiece. When I called my parents to share my excitement about finding the perfect property, my mother sighed. "Corey, that sounds like a waste of your savings. Amanda needs help with her tuition for her new program. Can you spare anything for your sister?" Despite their lack of support, I put in an offer the next day. When it was accepted, I drove alone to the property and stood on what would become my front porch, watching the sunset over the lake. For the first time in my life, I felt true ownership of something beautiful. This was mine, earned through my own hard work and determination. No one could take that feeling away from me. As I signed the final paperwork for the land purchase, I made a promise to myself. I would build my dream here, board by board if necessary, no matter how long it took. The building journey that followed would span the next 12 years of my life. While maintaining my position at Westbrook Associates, where I gradually climbed to senior architect, I dedicated every spare moment to my property. During that first spring, I purchased a used trailer and placed it on the land, creating a rustic but functional weekend home. Each Friday after work, I'd make the 3-hour drive north, arriving well after midnight, just to wake at dawn and work until Sunday evening. The drive home was always bittersweet, exhausted but fulfilled, knowing I was building something meaningful. The property needed substantial clearing before any construction could begin. For 3 months straight, I felled trees, removed stumps, and leveled ground, saving the best timber for future use in the house itself. My hands grew calloused, and my back ached constantly. But the physical labor was strangely therapeutic after days spent at a computer designing buildings for wealthy clients. One Saturday morning, as I struggled to remove a particularly stubborn stump, an older man approached from the neighboring property. "You're going about that all wrong, son," he called out, leaning on a walking stick. The man introduced himself as Marcus Holloway, a 70-year-old retired contractor who owned the cabin half a mile down the shoreline. Without hesitation, he showed me a more efficient technique for removing the stump, then stayed to help with 2 more. That evening, I invited him to share the simple meal I'd prepared on my camping stove. "What exactly are you planning to build here?" Marcus asked, studying my preliminary sketches by lantern light. I explained my vision for a modern cabin that honored traditional craftsmanship, large windows to capture the lake views, a stone fireplace as the heart of the home, exposed beams, and natural materials that would age gracefully. "Ambitious for a young fella working alone," Marcus observed, but there was admiration in his tone. "Tell you what, I've got nothing but time these days. I could show you some tricks of the trade if you're interested." Marcus became not just a mentor, but a true friend. Twice weekly, he'd arrive with his old pickup truck full of tools, patiently teaching me everything from foundation work to framing. "I never had a son to pass these skills to," he told me once. "Guess you showed up at the right time." Progress was painfully slow. I created detailed blueprints during winter months, when weather prohibited site work. Each spring brought new challenges: permit issues, material shortages, or unexpected costs that forced me to pause and save more. 4 years in, with only the foundation and partial framing complete, a devastating storm hit the area. I received a call from Marcus at 3 in the morning. "It's bad, Corey. Really bad." His voice cracked over the phone. I drove through the night, heart pounding, to find portions of the frame collapsed and water damage throughout the site. For the first time, I considered giving up. Sitting amidst the wreckage, I called my parents, seeking not financial help, but simple emotional support. "These things happen for a reason," my mother said dismissively. "Maybe it's a sign to sell the land and help your sister with her wedding to Brandon. The venue she wants is quite expensive." Brandon was Amanda's second fiancé. The first marriage had lasted 8 months. That night, Marcus found me staring at the damage, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside me. He didn't say a word, just sat down and poured himself a small glass. "My wife, Julia, and I built our place twice," he finally said. "First one burned down 3 months after we finished. Started over the next day. The next morning, we began clearing debris and salvaging what we could. I took a 2-week vacation from work, living on caffeine and determination. By the time I returned to the city, we had not only repaired the damage, but improved upon the original design. Year 6 brought plumbing and electrical work, where my lack of experience slowed progress significantly. Marcus connected me with retired specialists who were willing to trade knowledge for fishing trips or home-cooked meals. I studied building codes at night, submitted and resubmitted permits, and slowly, methodically, the structure took shape. While I built my dream one weekend at a time, my sister went through her third marriage and divorce, each time draining my parents' retirement accounts for elaborate ceremonies and subsequent legal fees. Each family holiday brought thinly veiled requests for financial assistance, which I politely declined, explaining my commitment to the house project. "You and that ridiculous house," my mother would scoff. "While your sister struggles, you play with your little building blocks in the woods." By year 9, the exterior was finally complete. A stunning two-story structure of stone, timber, and glass that seemed to emerge organically from the landscape. Marcus and I stood side by side on the newly finished deck, watching the sunset reflect on the lake. "Damn fine work," he said quietly, his eyes suspiciously moist. Julia would have loved this view. The interior took 3 more years, as I crafted custom cabinetry, installed the massive stone fireplace, and splurged on floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. Every fixture and finish was carefully selected, often saved for and purchased months in advance, when I could afford them. The grand staircase was built from trees harvested from the property itself, a physical manifestation of my journey. When Amanda announced her engagement to husband number 4, my father called asking if I could pause that construction hobby to help with wedding expenses. I declined politely, but firmly. "It's not a hobby, Dad. It's my life's work." Finally, 12 years after purchasing the raw land, at age 35, I installed the last piece, a hand-carved front door with a subtle etching of the lake's shoreline. Marcus helped me hang it, his hands now shakier but his pride evident. "Most people never build something this meaningful in their entire lives," he said, placing a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Remember that, no matter what anyone says." We celebrated with a small gathering of friends from the architectural firm and locals who had helped along the way. My parents declined the invitation, citing Amanda's bridal shower the same weekend. Standing in the completed great room, surrounded by people who had witnessed my 12-year journey, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Every board, every nail, every decision reflected my vision and perseverance. The home was valued at nearly $790,000, but to me it was priceless. With the house complete, I began the joyful process of making it truly mine. I transported several pieces of furniture I had inherited from my grandfather, a master woodworker, whose craftsmanship had inspired my own attention to detail. His solid oak dining table, hand-carved rocking chair, and antique writing desk found their perfect places in my new home. To celebrate properly, I planned a housewarming weekend and invited Marcus and the handful of friends who had supported me throughout the building process. David and Sarah, from the architectural firm, Ray, from my first construction job, and Elena, my loyal assistant, who had covered for me during countless Monday morning late arrivals after working weekends at the property. "This place is incredible," David said, standing awestruck in the great room. "The way you framed the lake view with the windows. It's museum-quality work, Corey." For 2 days, we cooked meals in the kitchen I had designed down to the last drawer pull, sat around the fireplace sharing stories, and enjoyed the peaceful mornings on the deck. For the first time in 12 years, I allowed myself to simply enjoy the space rather than work on it. "What's next?" Elena asked, as we watched the sunrise on Sunday morning. "I'm thinking of taking my first real vacation," I admitted. "There's an architectural tour of Europe I've had brochures for since college. Never had the time or money to go." 2 weeks later, I was walking through centuries-old buildings in Barcelona, soaking in designs and details that would inspire my future projects. After years of single-minded focus on my house, this trip was both a reward and an education. I planned to visit 5 countries over 3 weeks, my first extended break from work in over a decade. 10 days into the trip, I received an unusual message from Mrs. Larson, an elderly woman whose property was visible from my dock across the narrow part of the lake. "Corey dear, are your parents visiting? Saw unfamiliar folks at your place yesterday. Wanted to make sure everything's all right." I hadn't told my parents about completing the house, given their consistent lack of interest. A sense of unease crept over me as I called Mrs. Larson from my hotel in Prague. "They arrived in a fancy car with another couple," she explained. "Looked like they were showing them around. Thought it was strange since you'd never mentioned a visit." I thanked her for the information, trying to quiet my rising concern. Perhaps they'd finally taken interest in my achievement. But why not call me first? The next morning, I received another troubling message, this time from Marcus. "Some realtor was taking photos of your property yesterday. Said she had permission." That true? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I called Marcus immediately. "Blonde woman. Drives a red SUV with the Lake Life Realty logo," Marcus described. When I questioned her, she said the owners had contracted her to explore market options. Didn't sound right to me. I checked my email and found nothing from any realty company. My calls to my parents went straight to voicemail. That evening, I received a peculiar text from my sister. Mom and Dad finally solving their retirement problems. Good news coming soon. Something was very wrong. I cut my trip short, canceling the remaining countries and booking the first available flight back to the States. During the long journey home, I obsessively checked my bank accounts and property records online, but found no unusual activity. Still, the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing hour. Upon landing, I drove straight to the county records office instead of home. The clerk recognized me from my many visits during the building process. "Corey, back from Europe already? How was it?" "Unfortunately, cut short," I replied. "I need to check if there's been any recent activity regarding my property." Her smile faltered slightly. "That's odd," I thought. "Let me check the system." As she typed, I noticed her expression change from confusion to concern. "There's a pending transaction," she said quietly. "Filed 3 days ago. A title transfer application." My heart sank as she turned the monitor toward me. There it was. A request to transfer the deed of my property to a couple named Robert and Jennifer Blackwell. "This has to be a mistake," I stammered. "I never authorized any sale." The clerk pulled up the associated documents, revealing a power of attorney form, with what appeared to be my signature authorizing my father to act on my behalf in real estate matters. "Is this your signature?" she asked gently. I stared at the document in disbelief. The signature looked like mine, but I had absolutely no recollection of ever signing such a document. Then I remembered, 2 years ago, I had emergency appendix surgery. My parents had visited the hospital, and I'd signed several papers allowing them access to my medical information. Had they used that opportunity to obtain my signature for other purposes? On my way out, I quite literally bumped into a realtor in the hallway. A blonde woman, carrying a folder with the Lake Life Realty logo. "Sorry about that," I apologized automatically. "No problem at all," she smiled. "Wait, are you Corey Richardson? What perfect timing. I was actually going to call you today to confirm the closing details on the Richardson property. The Blackwells are absolutely in love with the place." I froze, unsure how to respond. "What closing details?" She looked confused. "For the lake house sale. Your parents said you were traveling but had authorized them to handle everything. We're set to close this Friday." I mumbled something about checking my schedule and hurried away, my mind racing. They were 3 days away from selling my house, my 12 years of work, without my knowledge or consent. Before confronting my parents, I drove to the property to make sure it was still as I had left it. Everything looked untouched from the outside, but I noticed a sold rider had been attached to a real estate sign at the end of my driveway, a sign I had never authorized. Inside, small things were out of place. furniture slightly rearranged for showings, a stack of Lake Life Realty brochures on the kitchen counter, and most disturbingly, a detailed inventory of my grandfather's antique furniture. My phone rang. The screen showed Amanda calling. I answered with uncharacteristic abruptness. "What's going on with Mom and Dad selling my house?" There was a pause before she responded with feigned innocence. "Oh, you found out about that already? I thought you were in Europe until next week." "Amanda, answer the question." She sighed dramatically. "Look, they're just trying to secure their future, and help me out a bit. You know Michael and I are planning something special for our wedding, and—" "Michael? What happened to husband number 4? We separated last month." "Keep up," she snapped. "Michael is different. He's the one. But his business is going through a rough patch, so we need a little help with the venue deposit and—" I hung up and headed straight for my parents' house, the betrayal burning in my chest with each mile I drove. The drive to my parents' house felt like entering a time warp back to my childhood. The familiar streets where I'd ridden my bike, the park where I'd played baseball alone while my father took Amanda to dance lessons. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed a new Mercedes parked outside, a stark contrast to their previous complaints about financial struggles. My mother answered the door wearing an expression that shifted quickly from surprise to defensiveness. "Corey, you're back early. We were going to call you tomorrow about some exciting news." "Is that what you call selling my house behind my back? Exciting news?" My voice was steady despite the rage building inside me. My father appeared behind her, his face pale. "Son, let's discuss this rationally. Come inside." Their living room had been recently redecorated. New furniture, artwork, and a large, flat-screen TV dominated the space. I remained standing as they settled onto their plush new sofa. "Explain to me why the county records office has a pending title transfer for my property," I demanded. "A property I spent 12 years building with my own hands." My mother's expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. "You've always wasted money on meaningless things," she stated flatly. "That ridiculous house sitting empty most of the time while you work in the city. We need that money to fund your sister's 5th wedding and secure our retirement." "5th wedding?" I echoed. "Amanda told me Michael was husband number 5. And how exactly is any of this your decision to make?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "We have power of attorney. After your appendix surgery, you forged my signature," I interrupted. "I never signed anything giving you authority over my property." "We modified an existing document," my father admitted quietly, "but only because we knew you wouldn't be reasonable about this. The family needs that money more than you need a vacation home." The casual way they justified their actions left me speechless. For a moment, I was transported back to every childhood disappointment, every missed performance, every time my achievements were dismissed while Amanda's failures were supported without question. "The Blackwells are a lovely couple," my mother continued, seemingly oblivious to the magnitude of their betrayal. "They're offering $750,000, nearly $40,000 more than the asking price. The market is hot right now. You listed my $790,000 property for less than its value?" I asked incredulously. "We needed to sell quickly," my father muttered. "The wedding venue required a substantial deposit to hold the date, and our financial advisor suggested—" "Your financial advisor suggested committing fraud?" I interrupted. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Don't be so dramatic, Corey. We're your parents. Everything we have has always been shared with this family. Except that's not true, is it?" I countered. "Nothing was ever shared equally. Amanda received endless support while I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. I saved every penny for 12 years to build that house while you drained your retirement accounts funding her multiple weddings and failed business ventures." The front door burst open, and Amanda swept in with a thin, well-dressed man I assumed was fiancé number 5. "Is that my brother's car outside?" she called before spotting me. "Corey, perfect timing. Michael and I were just discussing the lakefront wedding concept. Your property would be absolutely perfect for—" She stopped short, finally reading the tension in the room. "He knows about the sale," my father explained wearily. Amanda's expression shifted from surprise to entitled indignation with remarkable speed. "Well, it's about time you contributed something to this family," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how stressful wedding planning is? The lakefront venue we want requires a $50,000 deposit. And that justifies stealing my house?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's not stealing when it's family," my mother interjected. "Your sister has struggled while you've been playing with your little building project. It's time you showed some consideration for others." Michael, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps I should wait in the car," he murmured to Amanda, who gripped his arm possessively. "Stay," she commanded. "This concerns our future too." I took a deep breath, trying to process the surreal conversation. "Show me this power of attorney document." My father hesitated before retrieving a folder from his desk drawer. Inside was the form I'd seen at the county office, along with what appeared to be a page from my hospital admission paperwork with my signature carefully cut and pasted onto the power of attorney document. "This is a literal cut-and-paste job," I said in disbelief. "Did you really think this would hold up legally?" The realtor didn't question it. My mother shrugged. "And we didn't think you'd make such a fuss. It's just a house, Corey. Your sister's happiness is at stake." "My sister's fifth shot at happiness," I corrected. "What about my happiness? What about the 12 years of my life I poured into that property?" "Oh, please," Amanda rolled her eyes. "You've always been so dramatic about that cabin. Some of us have real problems." Something snapped inside me, not into rage, but into a strange, calm clarity. These people, my biological family, would never understand what they had done. They would never see me as anything but a resource to be tapped for Amanda's benefit. "The closing is Friday?" I asked quietly. "Yes," my father confirmed, looking relieved at my apparent acceptance. "The funds will be transferred to our account, and we've already promised Amanda 40% for the wedding." I nodded slowly, gathering my keys. "I need some time to process this." "Don't be difficult, Corey," my mother warned. "The Blackwells are so excited about the property. They have children who would actually use that lake, unlike you." Without another word, I walked out the door, ignoring Amanda's calls about wedding invitation designs. As I drove away, I allowed myself one small smile, the first genuine one since discovering their betrayal. They had no idea what was coming. I drove straight to Marcus's cabin, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The old contractor was tending his garden when I pulled up, but one look at my face told him something was seriously wrong. "They're selling it," I stated without preamble. "My parents forged power of attorney documents and listed the house without my knowledge. Closing is Friday." Marcus wiped his hands on his work pants and led me inside to his simple but comfortable living room. I knew something wasn't right with that realtor. "Tell me everything." Over coffee that gradually cooled untouched, I recounted the confrontation with my family. Marcus listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing increasingly troubled. "That's not just immoral. It's illegal," he finally said. "Forgery, fraud, misrepresentation. They could face serious charges." "I know," I sighed. "But there's something they don't know, something I never told anyone except you." Marcus's eyes met mine, a slow smile spreading across his face. "The LLC." I nodded. "Richardson Lake Properties, LLC. The separate entity that actually owns the house." 2 years into the building project, after watching my parents drain their savings for Amanda's first divorce and subsequent wedding, I had consulted with an attorney friend named Thomas about protecting my investment. On his advice, I had created a limited liability company with Marcus as a 10% stakeholder and myself as the majority owner. The property deed, the construction permits, the insurance, everything was in the company's name, not mine personally. "What about the other property?" Marcus asked. I couldn't help smiling. "That's what they're selling. The investment lot." During the third year of construction, a neighboring property had come on the market, a smaller, less desirable lot with limited lake access and an old prefabricated cabin in poor condition. I had purchased it as a potential rental opportunity, registering it under my personal name rather than the LLC. While I had renovated it somewhat, it was worth barely a third of my actual dream home. "They have no idea they're selling the wrong house," I confirmed. I never told my family about creating the LLC or purchasing the second property. They saw a beautiful house on the lake and assumed it was the one I'd been talking about for years. Marcus shook his head in amazement. The realtor never questioned which property they were listing. My father probably just gave her the address of the only place he'd visited, the smaller cabin where I stayed once when they reluctantly came up to see what I was wasting my money on. They never bothered to visit the main construction site. I called Thomas immediately, explaining the situation and asking for his legal advice. "First, we need to document everything," Thomas advised over speakerphone. "Get copies of the forged documents. Record any further conversations if legally permitted in your state. Don't tip your hand yet." "What about the buyers?" I asked. "The Blackwells think they're getting my dream house, but they're actually buying the smaller property. They're innocent in all this." "That's the ethical dilemma," Thomas agreed. "Legally, if your parents only have the address and details of the smaller property in the sale documents, that's what the Blackwells are purchasing, regardless of what they were shown or told. But they're being misled. And you have to decide if you want to be part of that deception, even passively." Marcus suggested we drive by the smaller cabin to see if the realtor had been showing the wrong property to the buyers. As we approached, we saw the red SUV with the Lake Life Realty logo parked outside. A middle-aged couple was walking the grounds with the blonde realtor, pointing excitedly toward the modest dock. We parked down the road and watched from a distance. The couple looked genuinely happy, taking photos and discussing where they might place outdoor furniture. They had no idea they weren't seeing the property featured in the glossy brochures that almost certainly contained photos of my actual dream house. "Those poor folks think they're getting a $790,000 property for $750,000, Marcus muttered. "They're actually overpaying for a $240,000 cabin." The moral complexity of the situation weighed heavily on me. My parents and sister deserved consequences for their actions, but the Blackwells didn't deserve to be collateral damage in our family drama. "I need to meet with them," I decided. Before the closing, Thomas arranged a private meeting with the Blackwells at his office the following afternoon, explaining only that there were some details about the property that needed clarification before the sale could proceed. When they arrived, their excitement about their purchase was evident, making what I had to tell them even more difficult. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, I'm Corey Richardson," I began. "The actual owner of the property you believe you're purchasing." Their confusion was immediate. "Your parents are selling the property on your behalf," Mr. Blackwell stated. "They showed us the power of attorney." "That document is a forgery," I explained gently. "But there's a bigger issue. The property you were shown in the marketing materials and the one specified in your purchase agreement are not the same property." I laid out 2 sets of photographs, one of my actual dream home with its grand windows and custom stonework, the other of the modest cabin they had visited. The Blackwells' expressions shifted from confusion to shock to anger as they realized the magnitude of the deception. "We fell in love with the house in these brochures," Mrs. Blackwell said, her voice trembling. "The realtor assured us this was the property we were buying." "I believe you were intentionally misled," I acknowledged. "Not just by my family, but possibly by the realtor as well. The property you viewed, and the one specified in your contract, is worth approximately $240,000, not $750,000. Mr. Blackwell's face flushed with anger. "This is fraud. We'll sue everyone involved." "You would likely win such a lawsuit," Thomas interjected, "but litigation could take years, and the property you actually want isn't legitimately for sale. I had been thinking about this dilemma since discovering my parents' scheme, and finally made a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. "I have a proposal," I said. "If you're genuinely interested in the smaller cabin property, I'll honor the sale at its fair market value of $240,000. Or you can walk away from the deal entirely with no penalties, and I'll ensure your deposit is returned in full." The Blackwells exchanged a look, clearly processing this unexpected turn of events. "What about the house we thought we were buying? The one in the brochures?" Mr. Blackwell asked. "That property isn't for sale," I explained. "It's owned by a separate LLC, not by me personally. My parents had no legal right to sell it, and they didn't even realize they were listing the wrong property." After a lengthy discussion about their options, the Blackwells decided they needed time to consider their next steps. As they left Thomas's office, Mrs. Blackwell turned to me. "Your parents spoke so proudly of building this amazing lake house for the family," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "They talked about years of family vacations there." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. They visited exactly once and complained the entire time about the drive. Every board, every nail in that house came from my own work and savings. As I left Thomas's office, I felt strangely light, as if a burden I'd carried since childhood was beginning to lift. My parents had tried to take everything from me, but their own inattention and disinterest in my life had become their undoing. They couldn't even identify which property was truly mine. Now, it was time for the final confrontation. Thomas suggested holding the confrontation on neutral territory, his law office downtown. He arranged for his paralegal to record the meeting and had prepared documentation showing both the forged power of attorney and proof of the actual ownership of both properties through the LLC. My parents arrived first, dressed formally, as if attending a routine closing. My mother's smile faltered when she saw me sitting at the conference table beside Thomas. "Corey, what is this about?" she asked. "The closing is supposed to be tomorrow." The Blackwells. "Please, have a seat," Thomas interjected professionally. "We have some important matters to discuss before any closing can occur." My father looked nervous, his eyes darting between Thomas and me. "Is this necessary? We have the power of attorney. Everything is in order." "That's precisely what we need to discuss," Thomas replied, sliding a folder across the table. "This contains evidence that the power of attorney document is a forgery, created by cutting and pasting Mr. Richardson's signature from his hospital admission forms." My mother's face paled, but she quickly recovered her composure. "That's ridiculous. Corey authorized us to handle his affairs." "I most certainly did not," I stated firmly. "But there's an even bigger issue at hand." The conference room door opened, and Amanda swept in with Michael trailing behind. "Sorry we're late," she announced without a hint of actual remorse. Wedding planner ran over. "Did we miss the money part?" "Amanda," my father warned. But she ignored him, dropping into a chair. "I just want to make sure our venue deposit is covered," she continued. "The lakefront setup requires specific." "There will be no venue deposit," I interrupted, "because there will be no sale. At least, not the one you're expecting." Thomas activated a projector, displaying property records on the wall screen. "This document shows that the property being sold, located at 527 Lakeshore Drive, is owned personally by Corey Richardson and is valued at approximately $240,000. My mother frowned. "That's not right. The house is worth nearly $800,000. "You're thinking of a different property," I explained. "The one I actually spent 12 years building is located at 815 Pinecrest Lane and is owned by Richardson Lake Properties, LLC, not by me personally." The color drained from my father's face as understanding dawned. "The big house on the North Shore. That's not the one we're selling?" "No," I confirmed. "You're selling the small investment cabin I purchased as a rental property, the one you visited once, 5 years ago, and complained about the whole time." Amanda looked confused. but the brochures have photos of a gorgeous modern house with huge windows. That's what the Blackwells are expecting. Exactly, Thomas interjected, which constitutes fraud. The realtor photographed one property but listed another. The Blackwells are considering legal action against everyone involved, including you. My mother's shock quickly transformed into indignation. This is absurd. If you created some sneaky company to hide assets from your family, I created the LLC on the advice of counsel, I interrupted, precisely because I was concerned about something like this happening. I've watched for years as you drained your savings for Amanda's repeated failures. I wasn't about to let that happen to my life's work. Amanda slammed her hand on the table. What about my wedding? Michael and I have already told everyone about the lakefront ceremony. Michael, who had remained silent until now, placed a restraining hand on her arm. Amanda, I think we need to understand the legal situation here. Thomas cleared his throat. The legal situation is this. Attempting to sell property through forged documents constitutes fraud and potentially grand theft. These are criminal offenses, carrying potential prison sentences. My parents' expressions shifted from indignation to fear as the reality of their situation became clear. We never intended. My father began weakly. You intended to sell my property without my knowledge or consent, I stated flatly. You forged legal documents. You lied to the buyers about what they were purchasing. Your intentions were perfectly clear. Amanda began to cry, her familiar strategy when confronted with consequences. This is so unfair. You've always had everything while I struggled. One little house is nothing compared to... One little house? I echoed incredulously. I worked 3 jobs through college while you dropped out of 4 schools. I saved every penny for 12 years, building that house with my own hands, while you had 5 weddings funded by our parents. What exactly have I always had that you didn't? The room fell silent except for Amanda's theatrical sobbing. My father looked broken, while my mother's expression remained coldly defiant. What happens now? My father finally asked. Thomas outlined the options. Mr. Richardson could pursue criminal charges for the forgery and fraud. The Blackwells could pursue separate civil action for being misled about the property. Or we can resolve this privately, I finished. Here's what I propose. The sale of the smaller property will proceed at its fair market value of $240,000, not the $750,000 you were expecting. The Blackwells have tentatively agreed to this arrangement. My mother started to protest, but I continued. From that amount, 75% will be returned to the Blackwells as compensation for the misrepresentation. You can keep the remaining $60,000, contingent upon signing a legally binding agreement, never to attempt to access or claim any property owned by me or Richardson Lake Properties, LLC. $60,000? Amanda shrieked. That won't even cover half of our wedding expenses. Then perhaps you should consider a more modest 5th wedding, I suggested coolly. Or better yet, use the money for therapy to understand why you've needed 5 weddings before age 32. Michael winced visibly at this comment. The alternative, Thomas added, is that Mr. Richardson pursues criminal charges, the sale is canceled entirely, and you potentially face legal consequences, including possible incarceration. My father slumped in his chair. We'll take the settlement, he said quietly. Harold, my mother protested. It's over, Diane, he said with uncharacteristic firmness. We were wrong. We're lucky Corey is offering us any alternative to prosecution. Amanda stormed out of the room. Michael, following after an apologetic glance in my direction. My mother's icy glare suggested our relationship was irreparably damaged, though in truth, there hadn't been much to damage for many years. As they signed the agreement Thomas had prepared, I felt no satisfaction or vindication, only a profound sadness for what our family could have been. For what it's worth, my father said, as he returned the pen, I am sorry, son. I let things go too far. I nodded. unable to offer forgiveness I didn't yet feel. The papers will be processed tomorrow. The funds will transfer next week. As they left, I remained seated at the conference table, emotionally exhausted. You handled that with remarkable restraint, Thomas observed. 12 years of building taught me patience, I replied, and the importance of a solid foundation. 2 months after the confrontation at Thomas's office, I made the decision to move permanently into my lake house. The architectural firm was supportive, allowing me to work remotely 3 days a week and commute to the office for the remaining 2. Technology made the arrangement feasible, but it was the pull of the house itself that made it necessary. Every morning I woke to the sunrise over the lake, brewing coffee in the kitchen I had designed down to the last detail. The home that had been a weekend project for so long became my sanctuary, the physical embodiment of my perseverance and vision. Marcus became a daily presence in my life, often arriving with freshly caught fish or vegetables from his garden. "Never thought I'd see you actually living here instead of working on it," he joked one evening as we sat on the deck watching the sunset. 12 years of building, and I nearly lost it all because I was too busy to enjoy it, I reflected. Seems like there's a lesson in that. The situation with my family remained complicated. My mother had cut off all contact, while Amanda oscillated between angry text messages and requests for small loans for her wedding, which had been downscaled considerably. Michael had apparently departed the picture, making the wedding the 5th engagement, but 4th actual ceremony. My father, however, surprised me. 2 weeks after our confrontation, he arrived alone at the lake house, his first visit to the actual property. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," he said hesitantly when I answered the door. "But I needed to see it. What you built, what we almost took from you." I gave him a tour, watching his expression shift from awkward discomfort to genuine awe as he took in the craftsmanship and attention to detail throughout the house. "You really did all this yourself?" he asked, as we stood in the great room with its soaring windows and hand-laid stone fireplace. "With Marcus's help," I acknowledged, "and specialists for some of the technical work. But yes, most of it was just me, working weekends for 12 years. My father was silent for a long moment. "I never understood," he finally said. "When you talked about building, I pictured something simple, maybe a prefab cabin. I had no idea." "This is extraordinary, Corey." His words couldn't erase years of dismissal and favoritism, but they were a start, an acknowledgement of what I had accomplished against the odds, including the odds created by my own family. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he admitted as he prepared to leave. "She's still processing everything. But I wanted to say I'm proud of you. I should have said it years ago." The words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood and young adulthood now felt bittersweet. Welcome, but decades overdue. In the months that followed, I focused on creating the life I wanted in the home I had built. I established a scholarship fund for underprivileged architecture students, specifically those interested in sustainable building practices. The first recipient was a young woman from my old neighborhood who reminded me of myself at that age, determined and resourceful despite limited support. Thomas became a regular visitor, often bringing legal work to review on the deck while I sketched designs. "Best office view in the state," he declared during one visit. "Almost makes me want to learn how to build something. It starts with a single nail," I told him, echoing Marcus's words from years earlier. Perhaps the most unexpected development came through a landscape architecture project I commissioned to enhance the native plantings around the property. The designer who arrived for the initial consultation was named Rachel, a thoughtful, independent woman who approached her work with the same passion I had applied to building the house. "Most clients want to fight the natural landscape," she explained during her presentation. "You're the first one who wants to honor what's already here." Our professional relationship gradually evolved into friendship and eventually into something deeper. Rachel understood my relationship with the house because she approached her designs with the same dedication, as expressions of creativity and perseverance, rather than mere jobs to complete. "You built this place as a sanctuary," she observed one evening as we sat by the fire. "But you never expected to share it, did you?" Her insight was accurate. For 12 years, the house had been a deeply personal journey. Opening it, and my life, to someone else required a different kind of courage. 6 months after the confrontation with my family, I hosted the first real Thanksgiving at the lake house. Marcus was there, along with Thomas and his wife, several colleagues from the architectural firm, and Rachel. My father came alone, the absence of my mother and sister hanging in the air unmentioned. As we gathered around my grandfather's oak dining table, the same one my parents had intended to sell, I looked at the faces of the people who had supported me, believed in me, and helped me create not just a house, but a home. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "To found family, the people who show up, who see your vision even when it's just a blueprint, who help you build something meaningful." Marcus raised his glass. "And to the builders, those who create something lasting, brick by brick, day by day." My father, sitting somewhat awkwardly among people he barely knew, added quietly, "And to second chances." As the evening progressed with laughter and conversation, I stepped outside briefly for a moment alone on the deck. The moon reflected on the still lake, creating a perfect mirror image of the night sky. In that moment, I realized the most valuable thing I had built wasn't the house itself, but the resilience to overcome betrayal, the wisdom to set boundaries, and the capacity to create meaningful connections with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. A gentle knock on the doorframe broke my reverie. Rachel stepped outside, offering a warm mug of cider. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just reflecting," I replied. "For years I thought completing this house was the goal. Now I understand it was just the beginning." "The best buildings," she said, "are the ones that have room to grow with us." As we stood together watching the moonlight on the water, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The journey hadn't been what I expected. It had been harder, longer, and in some ways more painful. But standing in the home I had built with my own hands, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, I wouldn't have changed a single nail. The house that my parents had tried to take from me had instead given me something far more valuable. The knowledge that I could build not just structures, but a life of integrity, purpose, and authentic connection. Have you ever had to protect something you worked hard for from people who didn't understand its value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join me for more real-life experiences about family, betrayal, and finding your own path. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful structures are the ones we build after others try to tear us down. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.